This is the story of a little girl's disappearance. Some facts from this case may shock you. Helena, Montana sits nestled in the heart of Big Sky country. For decades, this quiet mountain town thrived on mining. Silver and tin drawn from the earth sustained generations of hard-working families. The community was tight-knit, built around the mines that provided steady work and honest wages. Helena's natural beauty is breathtaking. Dense forests blanket the surrounding hills. Crystal clear streams wind through valleys, and the Montana wilderness stretches endlessly in every direction. It was this peaceful setting that drew the Marshall family from sunny California in the early 1980s. Nancy Faye Marshall, a waitress, and Kim Marshall, who was studying radio technology at the time, brought their blended family to Montana, seeking a fresh start. In 1983, between the two of them, they had 3 children under one roof. The oldest was Nathan, 6 years old. The middle child was Naylene, age 4. Both were Nancy's children from her previous marriage. The youngest was 2-year-old Noreen, Nancy, and Kim's daughter together. The Marshalls were a close, loving family. When Kim married Nancy after her divorce from her first husband, he didn't just gain a wife. He gained 2 stepchildren whom he loved as his own. He was so committed to being their father that he gave Nathan and Naylene his last name, making them true Marshalls in every sense. Today, we're focusing on the middle child, Naylene K. Briscoe, born September 8, 1978, in Orange County, California, the same region where her mother Nancy had grown up. Shortly after Naylene's birth, Nancy separated from the biological father of both Naylene and her older brother Nathan, eventually meeting Kim Marshall, who would become the only father figure the children would really know. Nancy and Kim were devout Mormons, and their faith formed the cornerstone of their family life. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wasn't just their religion. It was their community, their moral compass, and their source of strength as they built their new life in Montana. But this story of family, faith, and fresh starts in Big Sky country would soon take a devastating turn that would haunt Helena forever. Little is known about Kim Marshall beyond his passion for electronics and radio technology. His hobby had become an all-consuming pursuit, so much so that he wasn't working a traditional job. This meant Nancy, despite her modest waitress wages, was the sole breadwinner supporting their family of 5. It was a financial strain, but they made it work through careful budgeting and Nancy's tireless dedication. The Marshalls were an outdoorsy family who regularly went hiking and camping. Living so close to Montana's wilderness, they made sure their children were wood-smart from an early age. The kids knew basic wilderness survival skills, how to find water, identify dangerous plants, and most importantly, what to do if they ever got separated from the group. These weren't just casual conversations. In Montana, teaching your children wilderness safety could be a matter of life and death. Their backyard playground was essentially Yellowstone National Park, with its active geothermal features and vast untamed forests stretching for hundreds of miles. The Marshall children were more comfortable in the woods than most kids were on a playground. In June 1983, Kim's local ham radio club organized a family picnic. Entire families were invited, giving the kids a chance to run free in nature while parents could relax and socialize with fellow radio enthusiasts. That morning, 4-year-old Naylene chose her favorite outfit, a bright yellow t-shirt paired with matching yellow shorts. The whole family, Naylene, Nathan, baby Noreen, Nancy, and Kim, piled into their car and headed south toward the wilderness area outside Helena. It was a gorgeous Montana summer day, with clear blue skies and temperatures perfect for outdoor fun. Around 4 p.m., as the afternoon heat reached its peak, a group of children approached their parents with a request. Could they walk down to the small creek nearby to cool off and splash around? The stream was only a short walk from the picnic area, clearly visible through the trees. The creek seemed just right there. It was actually the gateway to some of the most rugged wilderness in North America. The very beginning, 4-year-old Naylene, despite being an experienced little hiker for her age, began falling behind the group. Little Naylene climbed up, folded her little legs beneath her, and decided to wait for the others to come back. When one of the girls from the group returned to check on Naylene roughly 15 minutes later, she found only an empty boulder. "Naylene!" the older child called out, her voice echoing off the surrounding rocks. "Naylene, where are you?" But Naylene Marshall had vanished without a trace. They'd searched everywhere they could think of, but there was no sign of the little girl in the bright yellow clothes. At first, the adults assumed this was a simple case of a lost child, something that happened from time to time in Montana's wilderness. 4-year-old Naylene knew basic wood safety, and surely she couldn't have gone far. They figured she'd gotten confused about which direction the group had gone and wandered off the trail looking for them. But Naylene was barefoot when she disappeared. On one hand, walking barefoot through the rocky Montana forest would be painful and slow her down considerably. A small child couldn't get very far over rough terrain without shoes. On the other hand, those same rocks and fallen branches could easily cause a serious injury. What if she'd cut her foot and was somewhere hurt and unable to call for help? The families immediately organized their own search, combing through the forest around the boulder where Naylene was last seen. They called her name until their voices were hoarse, checked every hiding spot a scared 4-year-old might choose, and followed every possible path she could have taken. But after hours of searching with no trace of the little girl, Nancy and Kim Marshall made the call that would transform their family outing into a major criminal investigation. They called the Lewis and Clark County Sheriff's Office. Within an hour, sheriff's deputies, Forest Service rangers, and search and rescue volunteers converged on the area with a level of organization that impressed even experienced outdoorsmen. The response was massive. Nearly 2,800 volunteers joined the official search effort. This wasn't just professional searchers, this was a community rallying around one of their own. Members of the Marshall family's LDS congregation dropped everything to help. Neighbors who'd never met the family showed up with hiking boots and flashlights. Local businesses donated food and supplies for the searchers. The mood among the volunteers was determined and optimistic. Everyone believed they were looking for a scared, tired little girl who would soon be found safe in her mother's arms. Maybe she'd fallen asleep under a tree or gotten turned around and was wandering in circles waiting to be rescued. One of the first specialized resources to arrive was Duke, an experienced search and rescue bloodhound with an impressive track record. Duke had successfully located numerous missing persons throughout Montana's wilderness, both children and adults who'd gotten lost in the vast forests. The dog handlers gave Duke one of Nayleen's items to establish her scent, and the bloodhound immediately went to work. At first, everything looked promising. Duke confidently picked up Nayleen's trail from the boulder where she'd been resting and began following it through the forest. But then something strange happened. After tracking steadily for a short distance, Duke suddenly stopped, circled around confused, and lost the scent completely. The trail simply vanished. Experienced search and rescue teams knew what this usually meant. The missing person had been picked up, either by someone who carried them or by a vehicle. Authorities quickly escalated their efforts, deploying a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging cameras and bringing in 4 additional search dogs. But Mother Nature had other plans. On the second day of searching, rain began falling across the Montana wilderness, washing away any remaining physical evidence and making the search exponentially more difficult. For the first 10 days, investigators treated this as a lost child case. But when they finally conducted detailed interviews with the children who'd been at the creek, 2 8-year-old girls revealed something chilling. They remembered seeing a man in a purple jogging suit near the creek that day. More importantly, they'd witnessed him talking to Nayleen. The little girl had even said something to him about her brother being a fast runner. Most disturbing of all, the man had been trying to get Nayleen to play a game he called shadow tag, a game none of the other children had ever heard of. Suddenly, this was no longer a case about a lost child. This was an abduction. Soon, Nayleen's smiling face was everywhere, on highway billboards, milk cartons, grocery bags, and missing child flyers posted in store windows across the country. Her bright smile reached beyond Montana to families nationwide. But as Helena tried to return to normal life, the Marshall family remained trapped in an agonizing limbo. Months turned to years. By the time little Noreen turned 4, the same age Nayleen had been when she vanished, there was still no trace of the missing girl. To cope with their devastating loss, Nancy and Kim channeled their grief into action. They founded a non-profit organization dedicated to training search and rescue dogs, recognizing that not all police dogs were equipped for wilderness tracking. Their work not only provided them with purpose during their darkest hours, but also helped locate other missing persons across Montana. Meanwhile, investigators brought in a hypnotherapist to work with the child witnesses, hoping to recover additional details about the man in the purple jogging suit. Sketches were drawn up, but it did not bring any results. And then, in 1985, the phone rang in the center that was searching for missing children. The operator picked up the phone. "I have Nealon," a man's voice said. "The girl is alive and well." The man suddenly hung up the phone. The man was calling from a payphone, not from his home number. 2 months later, an envelope with no return address arrived at the sheriff's office. Inside was a typewritten letter, clearly typed on a machine to conceal the author's handwriting. "I picked her up on the road near Elkhorn Park between Helena and Boulder. She was crying and scared. I took her in my arms and she was shaking all over. I decided I would keep her and love her as my own. I brought her home with me. I have good investment income and can work from home, so I spend all my time with her. I teach her, and she enjoys traveling with me on trips. Her hair is now short and curly. She has grown. She's about 3 feet 9 inches tall and weighs around 50 pounds. All 4 of her upper front teeth have come in, plus 2 bottom ones. She bathes and brushes her teeth every day. She eats well. Her favorite foods are pizza and cherry Coke. She would be happy to tell you about our trips to San Francisco, New York, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Nashville, Chicago, Puerto Rico, and Canada. We even spent a month in Britain last year, and she loved it. Our passports raised no questions. The first letter was followed by several more. Police received reports of a girl matching Nylene's description at a restaurant in Janesville, Wisconsin, but officers couldn't act on the sighting. Finding the person who had written about keeping Nylene seemed equally impossible. In 1990, the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries featured Nylene's case. The show asked viewers to call with any information, even anonymously. Soon after, students from a Washington state school called in. They believed their classmate was the missing girl. She matched Nylene's description perfectly. Excited police rushed to investigate. They spoke with classmates and teachers, contacted the girl's father, and discovered her documents were forged. This was indeed a kidnapped child, but not Nylene. The girl was Monica Bonilla, abducted by her own father 9 years earlier. Her mother had been searching desperately and was close to giving up hope. Monica was finally reunited with her family. So Nylene's story brought together a loving mother and daughter, even though Nylene herself was still nowhere to be found. Years passed, and in 1991, the Marshall family received what could only be described as bittersweet hope. In 1991, a man with a criminal record named Richard James Wilson walked into the police station and confessed to killing Nylene and another woman. He claimed he murdered the girl that same day and dumped her body in an abandoned mine shaft near the park where the family had been camping. Detectives were intrigued. Wilson had been convicted of child molestation and was on probation. More importantly, he had been living in Helena in 1983, when Nylene disappeared. Wilson agreed to lead police to the location. They excavated the 25-foot mine shaft but found no remains. After further investigation and finding no evidence linking Wilson to the crime, police released him. The false confession had given the Marshall family false hope, only to crush it once again. In 1994, the Marshall family moved to Japan for Kim's work assignment. The following year, they were set to relocate to Mexico. Nancy went ahead alone to find housing for the family. She was found hanged in a Mexican hotel room. Her death was ruled a homicide. The Marshall family now faced an unimaginable double tragedy, losing not only their beloved daughter and sister, but now their mother as well. In 1997, Nylene's case took an unexpected turn. A pregnant 19-year-old woman walked into a New Orleans hospital, far from Montana. She gave her name as Helena and said she remembered almost nothing about her past. No childhood illnesses, no family medical history. When asked about her parents, she said she believed her mother's name might be Nylene, an extremely rare name in the United States. Could this young woman be the missing girl now grown up? What were the odds that her mother was really named Nylene? Maybe she remembered the name from childhood, but what if it was actually her name? The young woman had introduced herself as Helena. Remember where Nylene's family lived? Helena, Montana. The connection seemed too strong to be coincidence. Even stranger, an unidentified man had accompanied the woman to the hospital. The mysterious pair disappeared before the baby was born. Police immediately launched a search. The woman's age matched what Nylene's would be now. They found her and obtained a blood sample for DNA testing, but there was a problem. Who could they compare it to? Kim wasn't Nyleen's biological father, and Nancy was dead. Investigators found a DNA sample Nancy had provided early in the investigation, but it had degraded due to poor storage conditions. The testing process took months. After an agonizing wait, the results came back. No match. The 19-year-old Helena was not Nyleen Marshall. In 2018, a strange development occurred. Several business owners in Wisconsin received anonymous letters postmarked from Cincinnati. Inside were age-progressed photos of Nyleen, images showing what she might look like as an adult. Who sent them? And why Wisconsin, where Nyleen had reportedly been spotted years earlier? Police were notified about the mysterious letters, but their sender remains unknown. This latest lead, like so many others, went nowhere. Today, Nyleen would be nearly 50 years old. Age-progressed images show what she might look like now. Perhaps your neighbor, a nurse at the local hospital, or a stranger on the bus, someone, somewhere, might recognize the little girl who vanished so long ago. Her case has gone cold, with no significant developments in years. The Marshall family deserves answers. Nyleen deserves justice. And somewhere out there, the truth is waiting to be discovered. That's the story, dear friends. Subscribe and please like it. Thank you for watching this story to the end.
My name is Stephanie. Danny was my older sister.
Hi, Mom.
Danny was 15 years old, the kind of older sister that every little sister looks up to.
Nice stuff.
Sorry.
Dad was sitting there, he's like, come on, let's try.
She was upset with my parents and needed some space to herself.
Bozeman, Montana, 1996. 15-year-old Danny Houshins had just gotten her driver's license. She had her first car, a Chevrolet pickup truck. She drove it proudly around town. Danny knew the forests around her home like the back of her hand, went camping with her parents, and climbed the local peaks. She was fearless and smart. She was an honor roll student. At school, she was known as a dedicated, hard-working student. One September day, Danny would drive out to the river for a walk. The girl would never return home alive from that trip, and her sister would have to fight for answers about Danny's death for a full 24 years. Bozeman, Montana, a small town tucked away in a valley once known as the Valley of Flowers. For centuries, this land was home to several Native American tribes, until European settlers arrived in the late 1800s. One of them was John Bozeman, the pioneer whose name the town still carries. Today, Bozeman is a quiet place with a population of about 50,000, surrounded by breathtaking mountain peaks, lush valleys, crystal-clear rivers, and endless forests. The town has always been deeply connected to the outdoors, hunting, fishing, hiking. For locals, spending time in nature isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. Kids here grow up with that spirit of adventure from the very beginning. That was exactly the case for the Hutchins family. On November 11th, 1980, Cheryl and Rex Hutchins welcomed their daughter, Danielle Edeline. Danny for short. The couple had 3 children, Danny, her younger sister Stephanie, and their brother Jake. By 1996, Danny was 15 years old and Stephanie was 12. The 2 sisters were inseparable. Stephanie looked up to Danny in everything. She saw her older sister as her role model. And Danny truly had a bright spirit. She was funny, outgoing, and loved by everyone around her. She was passionate about science, did well in school and had a natural curiosity about the world. At the same time, she wasn't afraid to laugh at herself, a quality that made her even more likable. Like many kids in Montana, Danny grew up skiing, hiking, rafting, and riding horses with her family. The outdoors wasn't just a backdrop to her life. It was at the center of it. In 1996, Danny reached a milestone she was especially proud of. At just 15 years old, she earned her driver's license. Back then in Montana, teens could legally drive at that age. For Danny, getting behind the wheel of her own pickup truck meant freedom and independence, and she embraced it wholeheartedly. September 21st was a Saturday. There was an argument in the Houchins family that day. It's a common thing in a family with a teenage girl. To unwind after the conflict, Danny went for a walk in the mountains by car. Cheryl, the mother, gave her her wristwatch so that the girl could keep track of the time. They should have guests in the evening. She needs to be home on time. Danielle just wanted some space, a little time away from home, away from her parents. Her mom and dad weren't worried about her. She knew the town inside and out. She knew the woods. The mountain trails were as familiar to her as her own backyard. She understood not to trust strangers. At 15, she wasn't a little kid anymore. In their minds, she was safe. Besides, Montana in those days was peaceful. Crime just wasn't something that happened here. Life moved at a slow, predictable pace. You could even call it boring. The sun was setting, and Danielle still wasn't home. Her worried parents headed out at dusk to search for their daughter. They knew she'd gone to walk near Cameron Bridge, where thick forest lines the riverbank. That's where they found her pickup truck. The vehicle was unlocked, completely out of character for responsible Danielle. Not only were her personal belongings inside, but her father's laptop as well. Why would she leave without securing the truck? On the trail beside the car, her parents discovered Danielle's keys and water bottle scattered on the ground. Cheryl's stomach dropped. She knew instinctively that something was terribly wrong. Fighting to stay calm, Cheryl left a note on the windshield. If Danielle came back, she should wait in the parking area. They'd return for her soon. Her parents contacted the sheriff's office, and deputies quickly responded to the pickup's location. Volunteers joined the effort, combing through the woods with flashlights, calling Danielle's name into the darkness. By 5 p.m., visibility had become nearly impossible. The official search was postponed until morning, but several volunteers refused to quit, continuing to sweep the forest along the river and beyond. That's when two brothers helping with the search made the devastating discovery. Danielle's body lay just 60 meters from her truck. I was about to tell my brother, "Let's head home. What are we even doing out here?" Then I heard him say, "I found her." I walked over and looked closer. It was her. I could see the back of her head. My stomach turned. I knew she was dead. Danielle appeared tangled in the underbrush, still wearing the blue jeans and gray sweater she'd left home in. One shoe remained on her foot. The other lay nearby. She was face down in a muddy puddle, one arm extended, the watch her mother had given her twisted around her wrist. We stayed there about 45 minutes. When I realized it was her, I got scared, one volunteer later recalled. Stephanie still remembers how her parents learned of her sister's death. She and her mother were home, anxiously waiting for news, when her father decided to return to the river one more time. As he stepped out of his truck, one of the brothers approached him with the news that Danielle had been found. When he returned home, he told Cheryl simply that Danielle was gone. Cheryl misunderstood, replying that she hoped the search would resume at first light and everything would be okay. They'd find her then. But Rex stopped her. She's already been found. She's gone. Friends and neighbors wondered, had a killer come to Bozeman? One of Danielle's close friends was Rochelle Shrewd, who knew both Houchin's sisters well. She struggled to find words for her shock. "You never expect something like this to happen to one of your friends," she said. On September 25th, 400 people gathered at the local church to say goodbye to Danielle. Before the funeral, an autopsy was performed, concluding that she had died from drowning. How it happened, however, remained unclear. The report noted water and mud in her airways as if she had suffocated. But Danielle was definitely a capable swimmer, and she wasn't found in the river. She was discovered in a shallow, muddy puddle on the riverbank. Police told the grief-stricken family that Danielle had most likely died in an accident. She slipped, fell face first into the mud, and drowned. Her family didn't buy it. Everyone knew Danielle was an experienced outdoorswoman with strong survival skills. Even her family doctor, who knew her well, told police she had no medical conditions that would cause her to suddenly lose consciousness and be unable to lift herself out of shallow mud. And again, this wasn't the deep part of the river. She was found on the shore in inches of water. The family was left alone with their questions and suspicions, alone with their grief. Danielle was laid to rest, and her family tried to come to terms with what police called a freak accident. But Stephanie couldn't accept it. She refused to believe her sister had simply slipped and died. 24 years passed. Danielle Houchins became a cold case. Then, in recent years, a new detective arrived in town, Matt Boxmeyer. By then, none of the old-timers remained in the police department. The sheriff's office had completely turned over. While reviewing old files, Boxmeyer pulled Danielle's case. After scanning the medical examiner's report, Boxmeyer was horrified. This couldn't have been a simple drowning. Danielle hadn't just died accidentally. This girl had been murdered. It turned out the original autopsy had found bruising on her neck, toward the back near the base of her skull, as if someone had forcibly held her head underwater. There were scratches on her scalp, suggesting she'd fought back against whoever was holding her from behind. But that wasn't all. There was evidence of sexual assault, which meant male DNA. They'd also found several male hairs in her underwear, and mud wasn't just in her airways, it was in her lungs and even her stomach. Later, Boxmeyer would discover that this DNA had been tested years ago with no matches found. Worse, that testing had consumed most of the sample, leaving the new generation of investigators with barely anything to work with. That's when I learned Danielle didn't just drown in water, Stephanie remembered. Someone held her head down in the mud. There was mud in her lungs and stomach. She had bruising on the back of her head. Someone forcibly held her head underwater. She fought back. She clawed at them. Stephanie was furious. She began demanding a new investigation into her sister's death. Thanks to her persistence, the cause of death was finally changed to homicide. Now, investigators needed to analyze the DNA and figure out what happened that day and who Danielle had encountered by the river. Stephanie also accused the former sheriff of hiding the truth from her family. She was convinced they'd been lied to. Yes, police sometimes withhold certain facts from families to protect an investigation. Relatives might discuss case details at a coffee shop. Someone could overhear, and word might get back to the actual perpetrator, but why hide such crucial evidence? Why not reveal that DNA had been found, that she'd been sexually assaulted, that this was definitely a murder? In 2021, Danielle's case got serious attention. The new sheriff, Dan Springer, was the complete opposite of his 1990s predecessor. He also believed the original investigation had been badly bungled. It was time to make things right. A retired detective named Tom Elfman joined the effort. Tom had moved to Montana after years serving in the military and working for the LAPD, where he'd investigated brutal homicides. He was elderly and had just settled into retirement, enjoying the quiet life. But when he heard about Danielle's case being reopened, he couldn't stay on the sidelines. He walked into the Bozeman Sheriff's office and told his colleagues he was ready to come back to work. Tom wasn't interested in a peaceful retirement. He quickly connected with Stephanie, promising he'd find the killer no matter what it took. And Stephanie believed him. Tom took personal control of analyzing the DNA evidence that had been found. He constantly called the labs asking if they had results yet, how everything was progressing. But what remained from the girl's underwear was almost impossible to use. The issue was that these were hairs, most likely from a man's arm, that had fallen out naturally, meaning she hadn't torn them from him, so they had no roots. In cases like this, extracting DNA is extremely difficult, almost impossible. But technology had advanced so much that they managed to extract a full genetic profile from one of the 4 hairs. At least, they were able to create a usable sample. Only one specialized lab in the country was capable of handling such challenging cases. They uploaded the sample to CODIS, the National DNA Database, but found no matches. This meant the perpetrator had never been arrested and convicted. Their only remaining hope lay with public genealogy databases. That's when Tom decided to bring in C.C. Moore, a genetic genealogy specialist. She even has her own TV show. C.C. Moore searches public genealogy databases, where people upload their DNA out of curiosity, looking for criminals' relatives. She's solved hundreds of cases by building family trees for perpetrators, then diving into social media to track where relatives moved, worked, and who they married. That's exactly what Moore did here. After studying massive amounts of information and building multiple family trees, she found a match. A couple with several children, including 3 sons. But there was a problem. This family lived in New Hampshire while the murder happened in Montana. That didn't faze C.C. Moore. She started searching for these sons on social media, looking for any Montana connections, photos, posts, anything. Bingo! The youngest son had written in his profile that on July 1st, 1996, he'd moved to Bozeman, Montana. Danielle was murdered that fall. On May 1st, 2024, the prime suspect finally had a name: Paul Nathaniel Hutchinson. He was 55 in 2024. He'd moved to Bozeman after military service at age 27 to attend Montana State University. When C.C. Moore identified him, he was married with 2 children, a boy and a girl. They'd been married 24 years. Doesn't sound like a brutal killer's profile, right? The man loved hunting and fishing, spent lots of time outdoors, and was described by friends as friendly and quiet. But here's the kicker. He knew Rochelle Shrewd very well. Remember her? Danielle's school friend. Hutchinson had taught Rochelle everything about fishing. She also loved the outdoors, hunting and fishing. They'd often go out fishing together, just the two of them, in a boat. Rochelle couldn't believe he could have killed her friend years ago. She insisted that despite all their solo trips into the wilderness, she'd never felt uncomfortable or unsafe with him. He would never hurt anyone. So police knew whose DNA was found on Danielle's body. But to put him behind bars, they needed a fresh sample to compare with the evidence from the victim. This is usually done covertly, like grabbing a discarded coffee cup from a suspect. Trash isn't private property, so these samples are admissible in court. Nothing stopped police from simply tailing their suspect and snagging something from his garbage. But Tom Elfman wanted to talk to Hutchinson face to face. Maybe he'd slip up and reveal something. Plus, it would be pretty interesting to see how he'd react. On July 23rd, 2024, police went to Hutchinson's workplace. He was living about 100 miles from Bozeman in Dillon, Montana. They had to meet somewhere public so the suspect could leave if he wanted. They didn't have grounds to arrest him yet. But Hutchinson invited the officers into his office himself. We have the body cam footage. Pay attention to the man's body language. Good afternoon, Paul. Afternoon. I'm Tom Elfman from the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. We wanted to talk with you. We're interviewing fishermen about what's been happening along riverbanks in southwest Montana. I see. Do you have a minute? Sure. In the office that Paul himself had invited the officers into, they showed him several photos of missing and murdered people. Among them was Danielle's picture. This is Danielle Houchins. She was found murdered by the Gallatin River in September 1996. You ever fished there? I've set nets on the Gallatin. Ever heard of Cameron Bridge fishing spot? Yeah. You been there? That's on Jackrabbit Lane, right? Yes. Maybe you saw her there, or someone who looked like her. I honestly don't even know. Maybe. I've been to 100 fishing spots one way or another. Could you have been there when she was killed? No. You didn't set nets there? No. Definitely not in September. What are you trying to ask? Are you getting at? I'm asking what you remember. What happened then? No, I don't remember anything. You want to ask me something else? No, that's enough for us. Paul was fidgeting, wringing his hands, scratching himself, biting his lips, trying to lean back and avoid looking at Danielle's photo at all costs. He kept as much distance as possible between himself and the table, and the officers. He was sweating like he was in a sauna, though it was genuinely hot that day. There was something unfinished in his responses. He seemed almost like he couldn't believe his luck, but at the same time was thinking, who dodged that bullet? But deep down, he knew he hadn't dodged anything. He understood that he was caught. He was probably shocked that the police let him go so easily, but that scared him even more. He realized they knew. After the interrogation, Hutchinson continued acting strangely. They put him under surveillance. Undercover officers watched him tearing down roads at breakneck speeds, making sudden U-turns, speeding up again, driving with no apparent destination or plan. He seemed to be thinking through his next move, trying to outrun his own terrifying thoughts. He knew he was caught, and he'd been afraid of this day his entire life. During the nearly 2-hour interview, Hutchinson showed extreme agitation. Investigators noted He was sweating profusely, scratching his face, and biting his hand. When shown Danielle's photo, Hutchinson visibly recoiled. It was clear he was uncomfortable. After his release, he behaved erratically, the sheriff's office reported. When Stephanie learned about this meeting, she was elated. Finally, justice would be served. She began imagining the long, painful trial ahead, having to look into Danielle's killer's eyes, telling everyone over and over what a wonderful person her sister was, reliving that grief all over again. But she only had 12 hours to think about it. Then she got a call from the sheriff's office. "He's dead. He killed himself," Detective Tom Elfman said over the phone. 12 hours after talking to police, Paul Hutchinson got in his car, drove to a remote location, and put a bullet in his head. Before doing so, he called 911 and told them where to find him, claiming an officer was in trouble, though he wasn't a police officer himself. DNA from Hutchinson's remains was compared to evidence from Danielle's case. Of course, the samples matched 100%. Paul Hutchinson was Danielle's killer. Danielle and Paul didn't know each other. That evening, Hutchinson was in the woods. He was working part-time as a forest ranger. There, he spotted the girl walking alone. He sexually assaulted Danielle and drowned her, holding her head underwater on the riverbank. He tried to hide her body, dragging it into the bushes. We can tell from the body's position, and because the girl's watch had slipped down her wrist. Afterward, Hutchinson went home and lived for years with complete impunity. Stephanie couldn't figure out how she felt about Paul's death. On one hand, it was a 100% admission of guilt. He couldn't last even a day. But on the other hand, he never spent an hour in prison. He lived a long, full life, while Danielle never even got to celebrate her 16th birthday. Stephanie still remembers her sister handling the items found in her pockets that tragic day. Scraps of paper, pebbles, and the driver's license Danielle was so proud of. The family scattered part of her ashes on nearby mountain slopes. Stephanie kept the rest for years, but after finding her sister's killer, she scattered them over the Gallatin River, where Danielle was found. While this man will never face a jury, I have no doubt he committed this brutal crime, Danielle's sister Stephanie Mallet said at a press conference. When it came time to answer for what he did, he chose to take his own life. He knew he was guilty, but couldn't face my family, his family, and the pain he caused us all. Did justice prevail? Everyone will have their own answer to that question.